Picture a Roman citizen at the public baths, glistening with olive oil from head to toe, while a slave draws a curved bronze tool across his skin, scraping away the oil along with the sweat and dirt of the day. No soap in sight, yet this man will leave the baths feeling cleaner than he has all week. So sit back, grab a cup of tea, and get ready to explore how Romans got clean without soap by coating themselves in olive oil and scraping it off with curved metal tools called strigils. Discover why this method was actually remarkably effective at removing dirt and grime. Understand how the public baths were central to Roman social life in ways we can barely imagine today. And learn why the grime scraped off bodies was so valuable that people actually paid money for it. The idea that ancient peoples were dirty, unwashed, and generally unhygienic is one of the most persistent myths about the past. When it comes to the Romans, nothing could be further from the truth. The Romans were obsessed with cleanliness. They built the most elaborate bathing facilities the world had ever seen, developed sophisticated methods for getting clean, and made bathing a central ritual of daily life. They just did it differently than we do, and their method, strange as it might seem to us, actually worked remarkably well. The key to Roman cleanliness was not soap, but oil, specifically olive oil, the same substance they used for cooking, for lighting lamps, and for 100 other purposes. The Romans discovered that oil has a remarkable property. It dissolves other oils, including the natural oils on human skin that trap dirt, sweat, and dead skin cells. By rubbing oil onto the body and then scraping it off, Romans could remove the grime that accumulated during daily life far more effectively than water alone. The tool they used for this scraping was called a strigil. This was a curved implement, usually made of bronze, iron, or occasionally silver for the wealthy, designed to fit the contours of the human body. The strigil had a curved blade with a channel running down its length to collect the oil and grime as it was scraped away. The handle was designed for a comfortable grip, and the curve of the blade allowed it to follow the natural shapes of arms, legs, backs, and chests. Strigils were personal possessions, often treasured items that Romans carried with them to the baths. Archaeological excavations have uncovered thousands of strigils across the Roman world, from Britain to Syria, from Germany to North Africa. They varied in quality from simple iron tools used by common people to elaborately decorated bronze or silver implements owned by the wealthy. Some strigils were decorated with engravings, some had handles shaped like animal heads or other ornamental forms. They were as personal as a modern toothbrush, and far more durable. The strigil rarely travelled alone. It was typically paired with an oil flask, known by the Greek term aribalos, a small container designed to hold olive oil for bathing. Many surviving examples show strigils and oil flasks, connected by a ring or chain, forming a bath kit that a Roman could carry to the public baths or use at home. These sets have been found in graves, suggesting that they were considered important enough to accompany their owners into the afterlife. The process of cleaning with oil and strigil was not something you did quickly in the shower. It was a ritual, often performed by slaves or professional bath attendants. The bather would first have oil rubbed onto their skin, a pleasant experience in itself, a kind of massage that worked the oil into every crease and crevice. The oil would mix with the sweat and dirt on the skin, loosening it, dissolving the grime that water alone could not remove. Then came the scraping. The strigil would be drawn across the skin in long, firm strokes following the contours of the body. The curved blade would collect the now dirty oil, which would run down the channel and drip off the end. A skilled attendant could work systematically across the entire body, leaving the skin clean, smooth, and surprisingly fresh. The sensation was probably similar to a deep exfoliation, perhaps a bit uncomfortable at first, but ultimately satisfying. The grime that was scraped off had a name. The Greeks called it gloios, and the Romans adopted the term. This mixture of oil, sweat, dirt, and dead skin cells might seem like something you would want to wash down the drain and forget about, but the Romans had other ideas. Gloios was collected, stored, and sold because people believed it had medicinal properties. Pliny the Elder, the Roman naturalist who died investigating the eruption of Vesuvius, devoted considerable attention to gloios in his encyclopedic natural history. He describes it being used to treat inflammation, to soothe joint pain, and to address various skin conditions. Athletes' gloios was considered particularly valuable. The sweat of young, healthy men who exercised vigorously was thought to contain special healing properties. Gymnasia and baths would collect the gloios scraped from athletes and sell it to people seeking its medicinal benefits. This might strike modern readers as bizarre, even disgusting, but consider it from the Roman perspective. They observed that something in this mixture, we now know, it contained skin oils, dead cells, and various biological compounds, seemed to help with certain ailments when applied to the skin. Without understanding the science, they developed a practical application. It is not so different from many folk remedies that, upon scientific investigation, turn out to have some basis in fact. The question that naturally arises is, why didn't the Romans use soap? After all, soap existed in the ancient world. The answer reveals something interesting about Roman culture and identity. Soap was known to the Romans, but they associated it with the peoples they considered barbarians, specifically the Gauls and the Germanic tribes. Pliny mentions that the Gauls made a substance from tallow and ash that they used for washing, and that Germanic peoples used a similar product. But to a Roman, using this barbarian concoction would have been culturally unacceptable. The oil and strigil method was the civilized way to bathe, the Roman way. Using soap would have been like adopting barbarian customs, an admission of cultural inferiority. This is not to say that soap had no place in Roman life. It was sometimes used for washing hair, where the scraping method obviously would not work. It was also used for certain medicinal purposes. But for cleaning the body, oil and strigil remained the standard throughout Roman history. Cultural identity proved stronger than any practical considerations about efficiency or convenience. The bathing process in which strigils were used was far more elaborate than the quick showers most of us take today. A visit to the Roman baths was a lengthy affair, involving multiple rooms at different temperatures, various activities, and considerable social interaction. Understanding this process helps us appreciate the central role that bathing played in Roman life. The sequence typically began in the apoditerium, the changing room. Here, bathers would undress and store their clothes in niches or cubbies along the walls. Theft was a constant concern. Martial's Epigrams contain numerous jokes about clothes being stolen from the baths, so valuable items might be entrusted to a slave who would guard them. Once undressed, the bather was ready to enter the bathing rooms. The tepidarium was usually the first stop, a room heated to a warm but not hot temperature. This was a transitional space where the body could begin to adjust to higher temperatures. Bathers might linger here, relaxing in the warmth, preparing themselves for the heat to come. The tepidarium served as a kind of warm-up, both physically and socially, a place to greet friends and begin conversations. From the tepidarium, bathers would proceed to the caldarium, the hot room. This was the heart of the Roman bath experience, a room heated to high temperatures by an ingenious system called the hypocaust. Hot air from a furnace circulated beneath the raised floor and through hollow spaces in the walls, creating an environment similar to a modern sauna or steam room. The heat would cause profuse sweating, opening the pores and loosening the dirt on the skin. The caldarium typically contained a large pool of hot water, the alveus, where bathers could immerse themselves. There might also be a labrum, a large basin of cold water for splashing on the face, or cooling off momentarily. The heat was intense, so intense that special wooden sandals were worn to protect the feet from the hot floor. Bathers would sweat, soak, and prepare their bodies for the scraping to come. It was often in or near the caldarium that the oil and strigil cleaning took place. The heat and sweating had softened the skin and loosened the accumulated grime. Now oil would be applied, mixing with the sweat, and the strigil would be employed to scrape it all away. This might be done by the bather himself, by a slave, or by a professional attendant. The Romans had specialized bath workers for every task. After the intense heat of the caldarium came the shock of the frigidarium, the cold room. This typically featured a plunge pool of cold water, the piscina, where bathers would immerse themselves briefly. The contrast between the hot caldarium and the cold frigidarium was believed to have health benefits, closing the pores that the heat had opened, invigorating the circulation, and leaving the bather feeling refreshed and alert. It was also probably the most dramatic moment in the bathing sequence, the shock of cold water after so much heat. Many bath complexes also included a palaestra, an exercise yard where bathers could work out before or after bathing. Romans might wrestle, play ball games, lift weights, or engage in other physical activities. Exercise would produce sweat, which would then be cleaned off in the bathing sequence. For many Romans, the baths were as much a gymnasium as a place to get clean. The architectural splendour of Roman baths is difficult to overstate. The great thermae of Rome, the baths of Caracalla, the baths of Diocletian, the baths of Trajan, were among the largest and most impressive buildings in the ancient world. The baths of Caracalla, built in the early 3rd century CE, could accommodate an estimated 1,600 bathers at once. The main bathing block alone covered about 5 acres, and the entire complex, including gardens and auxiliary buildings, sprawled across 33 acres. These were not merely functional buildings, but architectural statements, expressions of imperial power and generosity. The interiors were decorated with marble columns, elaborate mosaics, towering vaulted ceilings and sculptures. Natural light flooded through massive windows. The engineering was sophisticated, with hypocaust heating systems, aqueducts bringing fresh water, and drains carrying away waste. The Romans invested enormous resources in their baths because bathing was central to their conception of civilized life. Public baths were open to virtually everyone. Admission was free or extremely cheap, often just a quadrans, the smallest Roman coin, worth perhaps 1/4 cent in modern terms. This meant that even the poorest Romans could enjoy the baths, mingling in the same spaces as the wealthy. The baths were among the most democratic institutions in Roman society, places where social distinctions were temporarily suspended, or at least submerged in the hot water. The social aspects of Roman bathing were as important as the hygienic ones. The baths were where Romans went to see and be seen, to conduct business, to exchange gossip, to make connections. Poets might recite their latest verses, philosophers might debate, politicians might negotiate, merchants might close deals. The baths were a networking hub, a social media platform before social media existed. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher, complained about the noise of the baths in one of his famous letters. He describes the sounds of people exercising, the grunts of weightlifters, the slapping of masseurs, the cries of vendors selling sausages and pastries, the shouts of those splashing in the pool, the songs of the tone-deaf, and the howls of those having their armpit hair plucked. It is a vivid portrait of the baths as a bustling, noisy, thoroughly social environment. The question of mixed bathing, whether men and women bathe together, is complex and much debated by scholars. The evidence suggests that practices varied over time and place. Some baths had separate facilities or separate hours for men and women. Others allowed mixed bathing, at least during certain periods. Imperial edicts sometimes banned mixed bathing, suggesting that it occurred and was considered problematic. The baths were, after all, places where people were naked or nearly so, and Roman moralists had concerns about the propriety of such mixing. Wealthy Romans often had private baths in their homes, smaller versions of the public thermae that followed the same basic sequence of rooms. Excavations at Pompeii and other sites have revealed these private bath suites, complete with hypocaust heating, plunge pools, and all the amenities of the public baths on a smaller scale. Having private baths was a significant status symbol, a sign that you could afford the considerable expense of maintaining such facilities. The experience of bathing in ancient Rome engaged all the senses. The warmth of the heated rooms, the shock of the cold plunge, the slick feel of oil on the skin, the scrape of the strigil, the steam rising from hot pools, the echoing conversations in vaulted halls, the scent of perfumed oils and the sweat of many bodies, the sight of marble columns and mosaic floors. It was a full-body immersive experience that most Romans enjoyed regularly, often daily. The Romans believed that bathing had significant health benefits beyond simple cleanliness. They thought that the alternation of hot and cold improved circulation, strengthened the body, and promoted overall health. They believed that sweating expelled harmful substances from the body. They considered regular bathing essential to maintaining good health, and physicians often prescribed visits to the baths as part of their treatments. The bathing process required the services of many specialized workers. Beyond the slaves that wealthy Romans might bring from home, the baths employed a whole economy of attendants. The capsari guarded clothes in the changing rooms. The alyptae applied oil and performed the scraping. Masseurs kneaded tired muscles. Depilators removed unwanted body hair, using tweezers, wax, or other methods that Romans preferred to shaving. Vendors sold food and drink. Each of these workers played a role in the elaborate ritual of the Roman bath. The equipment Romans brought to the baths constituted a kind of personal care kit. Besides the strigil and oil flask, bathers might carry towels, special sandals for the hot floors, bottles of perfumed oils for afterward, and other accessories. Archaeological finds give us a picture of what these kits contained, and literary sources describe the rituals of their use. A Roman going to the baths was equipped for a complex experience, not just a quick wash. Modern science has validated what the Romans knew empirically. The oil and strigil method actually works. Olive oil is effective at dissolving the oils naturally present on human skin, the oils that trap dirt and dead cells. By applying additional oil and then scraping it away, Romans were essentially dissolving and removing the surface grime that accumulates on the body. The process is not so different from modern oil-based cleansers, which use the principle that like dissolves like to remove makeup and dirt. Soap works differently, using surfactants to emulsify oils and allow them to be rinsed away with water. It is arguably more convenient than the oil and strigil method, requiring less equipment and less help from attendants. But it is not necessarily more effective. The Roman method, properly performed, would leave the skin quite clean, and the added benefits of the heat and sweating in the baths would have contributed to overall hygiene. The Roman bathing tradition did not emerge in isolation. The Greeks had similar practices, and Roman bathing culture evolved from Greek precedents. Greek athletes oiled themselves before exercise and scraped off the oil afterward, using strigils very similar to those the Romans would adopt. The Greek gymnasium, combining exercise with bathing, was a model for Roman facilities. Roman bathing was part of a broader Mediterranean tradition of oil-based body care. Other ancient cultures had different approaches. Jewish tradition emphasized ritual immersion in water, the mikveh, with different concerns than the Roman focus on social bathing. Egyptian elite used oils and unguents extensively. The bathing practices of the Persian Empire influenced Greek and later Roman customs. Each culture developed its own relationship with water, cleanliness, and the body. The spread of Roman bathing across the empire was one of the most visible signs of Romanization. Wherever Rome went, baths followed. Military camps had baths, provincial cities built baths, even remote frontier outposts had at least basic bathing facilities. The Roman bath was not just a building, but a statement of cultural identity, a marker of civilization as the Romans understood it. To bathe in the Roman way was to be Roman. The decline of Roman bathing traditions after the fall of the Western Empire is a complex story. Christian attitudes played a role. Some Christian writers associated the public baths with paganism, sexual immorality, and worldly excess. The elaborate infrastructure of the baths required maintenance that post-Roman societies could not always provide. Water supply systems fell into disrepair. Hypocaust heating became too expensive to maintain. The great thermae were abandoned or converted to other uses. Medieval Europe had a very different relationship with bathing than Rome had. While the idea that medieval people never bathed is an exaggeration, bathing certainly became less frequent and less central to daily life. Public bathhouses existed, but were often associated with prostitution and disrepute. The elaborate bathing ritual of the Romans, with its multiple rooms and temperatures and specialized equipment, was largely forgotten in the West for centuries. The Eastern Roman Empire, which we call Byzantium, maintained some Roman bathing traditions much longer. The hammam or Turkish bath, which developed in the Islamic world partly on Roman precedents, preserves elements of the Roman bathing sequence to this day. The steam room, the hot room, the cold plunge, these features of the Roman thermae live on in bathhouses across the Middle East and beyond. The strigil itself largely disappeared from Western use after Rome fell. Without the oil and strigil tradition, there was no need for the curved scraping tool. Soap once considered barbaric, became the standard method of cleaning the body in Europe. The strigil became an archaeological artifact, something found in excavations and displayed in museums, its purpose puzzling to those unfamiliar with Roman customs. Modern interest in ancient bathing practices has led some to experiment with the oil and strigil method. Enthusiasts report that it works well, leaving the skin feeling clean and soft. The experience is different from a soap and water shower, more physical, more deliberate, requiring more time and attention. It is perhaps not practical for the hurried modern lifestyle, but it offers a connection to ancient practices and a different way of thinking about cleanliness. The archaeological evidence for Roman bathing is abundant. Strigils survive in collections around the world, from simple iron implements to elaborate decorated examples. Oil flasks of various designs have been excavated. The bath buildings themselves, though often ruined, still reveal their plans and systems. Mosaics depict bathing scenes. Literary sources describe the experience. Together, these sources allow us to reconstruct the Roman bathing experience in considerable detail. The physical remains of the great Roman baths are among the most impressive ruins of the ancient world. The baths of Caracalla in Rome still stand to a height of over 100 feet in places. Their massive brick and concrete walls are testament to Roman engineering. The baths of Diocletian were so vast that Michelangelo could fit an entire church, Santa Maria degli Angeli, into just one of the former bath halls. Walking through these ruins, one can still sense the scale and grandeur of Roman bathing culture. What does Roman bathing teach us about Roman culture more broadly? Several things stand out. First, it shows us Roman pragmatism. They developed a system that worked, not based on scientific understanding, but on practical observation. Oil dissolves grime, scraping removes it, heat and sweating aid the process. They did not know why this worked, but they knew that it did, and they refined the practice over centuries. Second, it shows us Roman sociability. Bathing was not a private activity, but a profoundly social one. The baths were community centres, gathering places, networking hubs. Romans invested enormous resources in public baths because they valued this social dimension of bathing. Cleanliness was important, but so was community. Third, it shows us Roman identity. The choice to use oil and strigil rather than soap was a cultural statement, a marker of civilized Roman identity as opposed to barbarian customs. Bathing practices were not just about getting clean, they were about being Roman. Fourth, it shows us Roman ambition. The scale of Roman bath buildings was extraordinary, far beyond what simple hygiene required. The great thermae were statements of power and prosperity, demonstrations of what Roman engineering and resources could achieve. They were monuments to Roman civilization itself. The contrast between Roman bathing and modern showering habits is striking. Where we spend perhaps 10 minutes in the shower each day, Romans might spend hours at the baths. Where we bathe alone in private, Romans bathed in crowds in public. Where we use soap and water, they used oil and strigils. Where we see bathing as a purely hygienic activity, they saw it as social, recreational, and even political. Yet beneath these differences, the fundamental human concern is the same: the desire to be clean, to care for the body, to feel refreshed and renewed. Romans and moderns share this concern, even if we address it differently. The strigil and the shower are both tools for human cleanliness, separated by 2,000 years, but united by common human needs. The Roman bathing tradition represents one of ancient Rome's most distinctive contributions to human culture. For centuries, millions of people across 3 continents participated in this ritual, scraping oil and grime from their bodies in bath buildings that ranged from modest military facilities to palatial thermae. The practice shaped Roman society, influenced Roman architecture, and expressed Roman identity, and when it ended, something was lost, a way of being clean that was also a way of being together. The strigils in museum cases today are silent witnesses to this lost world. These curved bronze tools once scraped the skin of Romans who lived and loved and laughed and died 2,000 years ago. They are humble objects, not precious artworks, but they connect us to the daily lives of ancient people in a way that grander monuments cannot. Every strigil was once held in a hand, drawn across skin, wiped clean, and used again. They are artifacts of intimacy, relics of an ancient routine that was as central to Roman life as the morning coffee or evening news is to ours. The next time you step into a hot shower and reach for the soap, consider for a moment the Roman alternative. Picture the warmth of the caldarium, the slick feel of oil on skin, the satisfying scrape of bronze against flesh, the social bustle of the thermae. It was a different way of getting clean, embedded in a different culture, serving different purposes beyond mere hygiene. But it worked, and for the Romans, it was not just effective but civilized, the mark of a people who knew how to live well and who built monuments to cleanliness that still astonish us today.